Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we just completed discussing the fourth sutra of the second chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So the topic or the sutra read as Avidya Kshetram Uttaresham Prasupta Tanu Vichinna Udaranam. So we discussed in great detail that out of the five kleshas are just painful obstructions. Any obstruction which stops us from progress in spiritual life is termed as klesha. So what are these obstacles or obstructions? So one of the primary obstacles is avidya, ignorance, and they give rise to other kleshas like egoism, attachment, aversion, and desire. And the desire, specifically the desire to cling to life, which is known as abhinivesha. So avidya is the root cause, or avidya is the main obstacle, and based on that forms the soil on which the other obstacles sprout. So these kleshas are nothing but seeds. They are in seed form. And as we discussed, they exist in four different stages. It is in a potential or a vestigial form. They are not very obvious to us. That is known as prasupta, as in the child. In a child, the samskaras of avidya are apparently, we say that one is as innocent as a child. Even a grown-up man, if you see, when we compare him, if he exhibits some kind of innocence, we say is as innocent as a child. But child is not so innocent as we think. He's not exactly innocent. His kleshas are in potential or prasupta avastha. Supta means sleeping. So they are partially sleeping, they are potential. They are present, but they are not expressing themselves now. That's why we don't see the samskaras being manifest in a child. However, when the child grows up, he can grow up with a lot of evil samskaras, and you wonder how I had nurtured him properly, but still, how did he become so evil or so wicked? So people are at a loss to know how, from where these samskaras have come. He was protected, he was surrounded by the most, he was given a protective environment to grow. But still, when he goes out in the open, when he is left to himself, when those props that prevented him from committing evil actions, they are removed, then they start expressing themselves. So that is known as prasupta, vestigial form. Or they may have been temporarily overcome, like they are vichinna or tanu. Tanu means they are in a very tanukarana is the ideal form in which the kleshas should be present in our mind. Tanukarana means we have reduced them, we have attenuated them. So that is the second form. Prasupta tanu vichinna. Vichinna means they are repressed or suppressed. We discussed elaborately what is the difference between repression of a klesha and suppression of a klesha. I'll not repeat it. We have discussed it quite often. And finally, we come to the udara. Udara means the vichinna, the udara avastha, not vichinna, udara, which means all the kleshas are freely expressing themselves. So they are not forced, they are not potential, but they are all kinetic now. They are set in motion. So we can see the character of a person and judge him by his behavior, because these kleshas have started manifesting. So some part of our kleshas have already become udara, fully developed, and they are for the whole world to see. But there are certain which are in hidden form or in repressed form or in a vestigial or a tanukarana. I mean, the form in which they will not harm you harm you much. But before that, the main klesha, which is avidya, we said that avidyam kshetram uttaresham. For all the other four kleshas, avidya is the root cause. Now, what do you mean by this ignorance, avidya? And also, before that, we'll consider what this klesha word itself mean. What is this word obstacle? Because if we compare obstacles in spiritual life, there is a subtle difference between a Hindu point of view and a Christian point of view on this subject. So the Christian will normally say that when he sins or when he commits a sin or some evil action which is classified as a sin, he generally means it's a positive act of disobedience against or expressing some kind of ingratitude towards God. God has given us all the set of rules, do's and don'ts, the commandments, whether you are a Jewish or maybe belonging to the Semitic tradition. All of them believe that when you commit certain actions which are not sanctioned by the commandments, which are not approved by the commandments, then they are known as sins. And if you sin on the day of judgment, you will be sent to hell or purgatory. So whatever it means, the difference is very slight when you compare it with the Hindu idea of sin or the Hindu idea of obstacles. These obstacles, of course, sin is an obstacle. So when a Christian says, he speaks of certain sins which a person commits, he means generally, in a general way, that it is a positive act of disobedience. Disobedience against whom? Against God, or ingratitude towards God. And by God, the Christian or the Semitic religions means God the Father, the reality as it appears within time and space in the form of a aspect of parent or especially father. The idea of mother as God is not so much developed in the Semitic religions. But anyway, he is supposed to be your guardian, the parent, and he is also the creator of the universe. And this particular aspect of creating the universe, the Hindus ascribe to Ishvara. So in chapter 1, we saw in aphorism 3, we know who Ishvara is. Ishvara has been defined. I am talking of the Patanjali's Ishvara, not the Ishvara as defined by the Puranas. So Hindus call him an Ishvara who creates this universe. He is the universal creator. In its, when you see Prakriti, the subtlest form, the subtlest cosmic form, which gives rise to the more gross and grosser things, the Sthula, Sukshma and the Karana. So the sum total of all the Karana Shariras, which combine together to form, he is the creator according to Hindu theory. So he is the parent, is genderless in the sense he is neither a father or a mother. You can call him either way. That is what Puranas tell us. You can call God the mother or God the father. It doesn't really matter. So Hindus call him Ishvara. Now when Patanjali speaks of an obstacle or a klesha, he refers to the negative effect that follows such an act. Any act which produces a negative act. A beautiful example is given by the commentators on this sutra. They say, suppose you are walking on a road, on a very dusty road, but suddenly there is a wind, a whirlwind, and the dust which is raised covers everything, obstructs all our vision, and you can't see anything beyond a certain distance. Everything becomes obstructed. This whirling dust cloud of ignorance rises in our mind and obscures the light of the Atman or the light of the Purusha, which is pure consciousness. So when the dust is raised by Prakriti because of the three gunas and the different forces, we don't see the Atman. We don't see our own Atman, and we don't see the God within us. That is to say, Christian thought or the Semitic thought emphasizes sin because they think it is an offense against Ishvara, who is other than ourselves. Other than ourselves. You can't, though Jesus says many times that the kingdom of God is within you, it has deeper implications. It is pointing out to the Ishvara which Hindus speak of. But anyway, the idea of a God is somebody who is outside, somebody who is powerful, somebody who creates, and somebody whom we call the Father in heaven. Now, the Hindu thought says that the offense which you are creating is not against God. God has nothing to do with it. I mean, the purely monastic. He says your own Atman is obscured. Your own reality is hidden from you. You are not seeing you as you are. You are masking yourself and masking others. And you look at the mirror, you see the masked personality. You don't see yourself. So this, according to Patanjali, it's the cloud just as a cloud of dust, a dust of, you may say, the dust cloud of ignorance, which we have raised because of the turbulence within our minds. The gross mind or the subtle mind, even the buddhi can give rise to turbulence unless it is highly, all the kleshas are removed and it is purified. So these kleshas, these are obstacles. So you have to understand the difference between the different points of view. The difference is not fundamental. Both speak the same thing. One speaks of God outside, another speaks of God inside. But there is some kind of disobedience involved. There it is a disobedience against the Creator, whereas it is a disobedience against oneself. It has been given a wonderful name in yoga, Prajna Aparadha. Prajna means your consciousness. So you are doing some kind of sin against your own conscience or consciousness, not conscience, consciousness. Your conscience tells you that you are doing something wrong. The message or the signal comes from within, but we don't listen because the dust cloud of ignorance has enveloped us, has enveloped the consciousness within. The value of Christian approach or the Semitic approach is both are having its own disadvantages and advantages. So the Christian approach or the Semitic approach, where you consider these transgresses against the Creator as sins, it at least heightens our sense of significance and enormity of the sin by relating it to a being whom we have every reason to love and obey. We are supposed to love God, our Father who is in heaven, and obey Him, not just love Him, just as a mother loves her child without any reason. But here you have to not only love, because He is not only your Father, but also He is one who can punish you. So you have to obey Him. He imposes a kind of discipline in our lives. So He is our Creator and Father. The value of the Hindu approach, on the other hand, is that it presents the consequences of sin or the errors because of kleshas, because of not able to control these kleshas, which results in the so-called sin of the Semitic religions, that they say it is simply you are alienating yourself from the reality or the consciousness within you. You are not disobeying God as such, because Patanjali says such a concept of God is not necessary, who is sitting with a stick in heaven to discipline us. We need not be fearful of such a God, but we have to be fearful of the reality within us. If we don't behave in a proper way, the consequences of these so-called sins in the ultimate aspect is our alienation. We are alienated from our own reality, and we see only the masked realities. But both approaches, that doesn't mean that one approach is superior to the other. If one is sincere, both approaches are good. They have their characteristic dangers if not properly understood. So that's why I just wanted to spend some time discussing, before we go into the classification of the different types of kleshas, their definitions. What is avidya, what is asmita, what is raga, what is dvesha, and what is abhinivesha. The 5 kleshas which sum up all the possibilities. The various combinations of these kleshas result in ignorance according to the Hindus and sin according to the Semitic religions. So the danger in both in misunderstanding this is our psychological inability to imagine the Atman. See, for example, the danger of the Hindu point of view. So if he thinks, that is the reason why when people take to Advaita, they risk the chance of becoming a little immoral, because they think they are Advaitins, they can do anything. The psychological inability to imagine Atman. If you are firmly devoted to the soul or to Sachidananda or the Atman within, then there is no danger. But such Jnani yogis are very rare. So we can imagine Ishvara more or less a little more easily as a father, as a mother, because the Hindu tradition gives you a lot of options. He says, if you find mother more appealing to you than the father, you consider Ishvara as a mother. You can have any sort of relationship. It is much more easier to understand because we have a human father, a human mother whom we can identify with. So it is easy for the Semitic religions, especially the Christians, to practice morality, provided they are sincere. If they sincerely believe that they are committing some kind of, they're disobeying their Lord. But for that, you have to consider the authority of the Creator, or who can punish you also, who is the Creator, who can impose a certain kind of discipline on you, and if you don't obey the discipline, he can punish you. So at least in that way, if you are a God-fearing person, as Christians and the Semitic religions ask us to believe that we are God-fearing persons, some kind of fear may be good in the beginning, because that prevents us from committing sin. And at least we feel some kind of regret for any offense that we create. Then we have to confess. Of course, there is the idea of confession. And at least for the time being, we take a resolve, because we really feel guilty, we go and confess, but that doesn't end there. And at least for the time being, we take a resolution not to repeat those sins. But the offense of erecting obstacles against an enlightening Atman, a conscious principle within, is not immediately evident, because we don't know what this Atman is. Who is he? Will he punish us? He is our own. So why should we worry? So there is a danger from the Hindu point of view, if we think, because it is too abstract a concept for most of us to believe in an Atman whom we cannot identify with so easily. But if we have a personal God, like we have the Father in heaven, though we may not have seen him, we have the concept of Ishvara, as there are so many options available to Hindus, just as of course Christians and Islam and others, they don't have so many options because they believe in only one God. But if that impersonal God has to be made personal, then you have a lot of choices. But ultimately, it is the impersonal reality which is spoken of in all religions, the one all-pervading reality which is known as Ishvara. Because we perpetually, in Advaita Vedanta, we are slipping back into that confusion of identifying the Atman with our ego, the Anatma. That is what Asmita means. Asmita has been defined like that. What is ego? Ego is mistakenly taking the non-self for the self. Our self should be evident if there is no ego, but the ego makes the pure and the infinite self as limited, as having qualities, good or bad. So, for example, we say kindly, almost approving, with some kind of compassion, uh, uh, we say that he is a habitual drunkard or he is a addict to certain substances. He then we also say in Hindu tradition, they say, oh, he's nobody's enemy, but his own. So he's committing a sin against himself. It's very easy to say, and they do not realize what a nonsensical statement it will appear to that drunkard. If you tell him that you are committing a sin against yourself, at least if you tell him that you are committing a sin against because it's not sanctioned in our scriptures, that is how discipline imposes for people who are at a lower stage. Perhaps this duality or this personal God helps a lot in following moral virtues. Because if you tell a habitual drunkard that what he is doing if is a crime against his own self, that I don't think he'll be in a position to understand. Only people who have deeply thought about what that spirit is, what that eternal spirit within the pure consciousness, obviously he doesn't have the intellectual capacity to understand. So for him, it is just a nonsensical statement. So he might go on committing crime. So that occasionally, when he feels totally alienated because of his bad habits, his drinking or whatever other habits he has, and then he suddenly finds he is all alone, he feels alienated, then he starts thinking. As Girish Chandra Ghosh, you find he was a drunkard, he had committed so many sins, but somehow he was feeling alienated. He was, for the first time, when Sri Ramakrishna very compassionately took his responsibility, he felt there was somebody who was my own. It was his own self manifesting as the Ishvara. But there was a person, there was a kind person, a guru, who was trying to lift him from that predicament. So this ground or the refuge, a human refuge or a human support, the idea of a personal God, that is provided, that provides a human ground or a refuge. And though we feel wretched because of certain things which we cannot avoid, like a habitual drunkard, though he may be, Girish was feeling remorse for all his actions because the whole society was condemning him, criticizing him because of his behavior. But at least he found some support. His guru came to him and he said, okay, if you can't do anything, please give the entire responsibility to me, I'll take care of it. Then he suddenly found the ground which was slipping away from under his feet. He found his feet firmly grounded and he found his refuge of life. So he says, how far, there is a great saint in Christianity who says, how far art thou from me? Who am so near to thee? I am so near to thee, but still I feel that you are so far. So the Hindus must beware, especially those who practice Advaita Vedanta, they must beware of taking their own sins too lightly. If you call them sins, they may not like to call them sins. They'll say it is out of ignorance. Yes, but what are you doing to remove that avidya? If avidya remains, even after listening to a lot of talks on Advaita Vedanta, monism, and the glory of the Atman, you may go on hearing. No doubt hearing has its own benefit, but after hearing for a long time, if you persist, because there is no sensitivity left, you don't think it is urgent, or you perhaps take your mistakes or sins too lightly. So he relapses into an optimism, a strange kind of optimism, which is based on a doctrine of reincarnation. So he tries to persuade or convince himself, oh, after all, I am the Atman. I have millions of lives ahead of me. I can take my own time. What is the hurry? That's what that is the danger, according, if we don't understand the concept of avidya properly, if we don't understand ignorance, what it is and how it can, as Sri Ramakrishna used to sometimes say, that when you are riding a carriage, when he went to visit a fort, there was a carriageway which went round and round, and you hardly realize that from the top of the fort it takes only a few minutes to come down, and you don't realize how much, because you are apparently traveling on a flat surface, but then it has a gradual slope, and within no time you are at the bottom. So that is what happens when one relaxes and doesn't try to understand the hurry or the urgency of trying to control these obstacles or these kleshas. So uh, the practitioner of monism or Advaita, where there is no personal God, no urgency, whereas the person who considers there is a God watching over him, if he's sincere, he'll be very careful. If he believes in that personal God, I'm not saying that all those who belong to Semitic religious traditions, they believe in a personal God or are even afraid of him. If they really believed, then they would not be committing sins. But anyway, this attitude of relaxing or not to be in a hurry to remove this avidya or ignorance has been condemned in a beautiful book, Confessions by Saint Augustine. It's a beautiful book. Saint Augustine is one of the greatest saints, great saints who belong to the Christian tradition. So he says, I, miserable young man, had entreated chastity of thee and said, grant me chastity and continence, but not yet. So he is repenting. He said, I know, because your commandment says. Now, this kind of belief and faith in the Creator, and believing that if the Lord has said something, and if that is the commandment, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, or they shall reach the kingdom of heaven. So what does this pure in heart mean? So this idea of chastity, the Augustine says, he prayed a lot, grant me chastity and continence, but not yet. So he says this, as they say in the Christian tradition, that the spirit is strong, but the flesh is weak. Spirit may be strong, because it is the spirit which tells us that you raise yourself above the spirit. But according to the Semitic traditions, you have someone whom you can confess. So that's why Augustine has written his book, Confessions. So by confessing, a little bit of burden is reduced. But still, that doesn't solve the problem. That's why he says, I, miserable young man, had entreated chastity of thee. So when he perhaps joined the order or joined the uh, uh, organization or the church, he had entreated, he prayed to thee. Thee means the Lord, to grant him chastity, but he has not yet granted. So he is in a hurry. The danger of that is the danger of a Hindu approach, where he says, okay, let me slowly practice all these things. Or maybe there is infinite number of chances God will give me. This birth, let me enjoy. And the next birth, let us think about it. But the next birth will never come. So that is one danger, where one tends to relax if that fear is not there. But the danger of the Semitic approach or the Christian approach is exactly the opposite. Since Christianity is predominantly dualistic, and it stresses the importance of Ishvara and minimizes to a certain extent the reality of the indwelling Atman, the Purusha or the Brahman, of which Ishvara is just a projection. Projection cannot be the reality. So the value of such dualistic thinking of a personal God teaches us devotion to God. But its danger is that it will keep on exaggerating. You will go on exaggerating, and self-loathing, or you hate yourself, self-hatred, oh, I am a sinner, I am a sinner, and some kind of impotent despair. You become you just feel that there is nothing I can do, only God can save me, there's nothing I can do. So a kind of negativity comes. So that is another danger. On the other there are advantages and disadvantages in both these approaches. So the Advaitin, or the people who, or the sadhakas who follow the impersonal God, they take matters in their own hands if they are strong enough, and they said, no, I shall not commit. It's a very positive approach. But here, if it is not practiced properly, if we don't confess and then don't repeat the mistake, we confess and don't repeat the mistake, then it is okay. Then the person who prays to the Lord will make progress. But if he just goes on, if confession becomes a habit, every time he uh, that's what happens most of the times. Even in within Hinduism, the Puranic, they just go and said they go to a temple, offer some kind of things, and then they will be saved by the Lord. That wrong ideas come. They pay the priest. Sometimes they themselves can't pray. They don't even have time to pray. So they are misguided by certain elements. And that is the danger of organized religion. So there are this priestcraft comes in, and they tell you that you do this, you do that, and we'll absolve you of all the sins. It's not just unique to Christianity, it is there in Hinduism as well. There the gods are different, so there are varieties of uh, ways in which the priest will assure you that, okay, you just do this ritual and you will be absolved of all sins. It's not so easy. So God the Father, the concept of God the Father in Christianity is so awe-inspiring. I mean, it creates a fear, but at the same time, if it is taken positively, it can inspire. So God the Father is someone who is just, who will listen to your prayers, and who also will inspire you to get rid of all your defects and sins, not just by confession, by his grace. Christ is so pure and good. So if the ideal is pure and good, that's why we again and again we try to emphasize that if we have an Ishta, somebody like Sri Ramakrishna, Rama, Krishna, Christ, Jesus or Buddha, then we have to meditate on their lives, the pure lives, the good lives they led, and compare ourselves with them. So that sort of comparison inspires a hope in us. If he can achieve it, if God can incarnate and show us the way, why can't we do it? So, but if the approach is negative, then we'll relapse into the lowest kind of egoism, identifying with our own weaknesses and feeling that, oh, we are helpless. It's possible for God, not for us. And that is another danger, and we cannot escape them. So there is a passive approach. We submerge ourselves in the feelings of guilt which overwhelm us, and we forget our divine nature and obligation it imposes upon us to struggle towards self-knowledge. So Patanjali can help this idea of obstacles. Why I compared these two traditions is that Patanjali, that is why a lot of people who follow the Semitic religion are first attracted towards Patanjali's yoga rather than other aspects of Hinduism or even Vedanta. Yoga is more attracts them more because there is no idea of personal God there. So he gives a very good unsentimental approach, which is known as klesha. He says it is just, you have to understand these 5 kleshas. Whether you accept a God or Ishvara, that he doesn't discuss. Or you accept the Atman, he doesn't discuss that. Of course, the idea of Purusha is there, but he doesn't emphasize. Something similar to Buddhism. Buddhism says, here is the problem and here is the solution. I have found the solution. So Buddha also is very, very rational, and so also is this yoga. It's an Klesha is, the word klesha is an unsentimental word. It does not imply any God who will save you, nor does it put the whole blame on or ask you to imagine that you are Atman and you are not the, but it gives you a scientific way. First it says avidya comes first, then ego comes, then that ego gives to raga, dvesha and abhinivesha. So you handle these three things which you are experiencing every day. There's nothing mysterious about it. Everybody knows what raga is. There are things which you like, that is raga. You are attracted towards certain foods, certain people, certain situations, and you have raga towards them. It is very common sense that a person will go towards that which gives him so-called pleasure in this world. So that is raga. So that's why vairagya means going against the raga. So vairagya means that. So why should you have raga? Raga is an obstacle. Though going after the pleasant is very natural. And then the second thing, avoiding, it is the same thing as raga. It is dvesha. Why do you hate certain things? Some people hate certain things. Some people don't hate certain things. A child, there are two children. One will hate the darkness. He'll hate the dark. The other fellow, other boy he doesn't have dvesha for darkness. In fact, he enjoys darkness. He just walks. He enjoys. He says, I have been in light for long enough. Let me see what is there in darkness. So he likes that. Whereas the others is terribly afraid of, some people are afraid of certain insect, like others may play with them. So what is raga for you may be dvesha for somebody else. You may like alcohol, but there are other ones who just hate the smell of alcohol, who may not like. There are smokers and non-smokers. So raga and dvesha, this, by terming them as obstacles, your own obstacles. It's not because it's a commandment from God that you have to follow, that you should not do this. How many do's and don'ts will you have? So Patanjali says, I'll show you what are your obstacles in your own life. They are personal obstacles. If you have raga towards certain things, classify them. If you have dvesha towards certain things, classify them and see what it does. And finally, if you have fear or if you have inordinate clinging to life, the fear of death, from which all the other fears come. So he finds a beautiful psychological approach and suggests, this klesha says that there is a course of positive action which you can start from tomorrow. You don't have to believe in a God, you don't have to be religious, you don't have to attend a single church or a temple or follow somebody. You can watch your own mind. These are the 5 kleshas, which begins with avidya, which is the ground. And if you understand these kleshas, then you can deal with your life yourself. You don't have to lie down and blame God and pity yourself. That kind of quality Girish Chandra Ghosh did not have. That's why Thakur loved him. Like most other drunkards, he would have said, no, this is my bad habit. I am doomed. That self-pity comes to most of the people who commit evil things. They blame society, they blame the circumstances, they blame everybody except themselves. And then they don't work, or they don't work hard to remove them. They think society has made him like that. And these things in social media, in movies and in dramas and plays, this idea gives them some kind of consolation, where you glorify such people who pity themselves and blame the system, blame others for their, then we sympathize with such people. That is okay from your point of view, but from the point of view of that person, it is harming him. So we don't work, he will not be motivated to work to remove them. But if Patanjali's method is followed, if we say that these are your own kleshas, nobody else has created, you have come with this baggage, you have come to this world with that baggage, and you have to now that you have opened your bag, you have to deal with all these items. Just throw away what you don't require and just march ahead. So the use of sin is misleading for Patanjali, for yoga. It is only one half the concept. No doubt it is useful to check a person, otherwise he'll go on committing sins. So because the very idea of sin implies the idea of punishment. It is like God is a creator, God is a punisher, and he will give you punishment by sending you to hell or to heaven if you have done good things. It is unfortunate because you see many people lose faith in the church, they lose faith in the temples, they lose faith in this kind of personal God who is punishing people for their sins, because when they see in the world certain sins are appear to go unpunished, they said these people, we are following all the rules, we are very, very honest Christians or honest Hindus or honest Muslims, we are practicing religion or practicing all the commandments, and still we are so poor, and see the other people, they are committing all sorts of sins. So where is God? Why does he not punish them? So that kind of danger is there. So there is a kind of doubt in the minds of such people that God may perhaps be subject to some kind of tricks, as many of the Hindus also believe that God can be somehow tricked. We'll do whatever we like and then finally offer the priest something and he will do something which will pardon us. That kind of idea, by committing any amount of sins and getting away by just confessing, or maybe whether it is in Christian tradition or any other tradition in the world, there are provisions by selfish people who go by the name of, not all priests are selfish, but most of the priestcraft. That's why Swamiji, because the priests are specifically, it is a living for them. If they can promise you that you can get away without any consequences, so if if you do certain things, certain rituals, so you can get away with all your sins. So people resort to so many superstitious rituals, fancies, and then even for natural calamities, that is more surprising. People had lost their sensitivity to such an extent. Even when there is some earthquake, flood, and famine, they say, oh, those people deserved it. They can be so merciless. Instead of saving, they said, oh, they deserved it. It is their karma. So it's not just in one religion, it's in all religions, that they are God's deliberate punishment. And otherwise they'll say it's the wrath of the creator, the wrath of the creator. You have sinned. So we also sometimes say that we have tortured the environment for long enough and now the environment is trying to subdue us. These things are explanations. So divine justice comes in different ways, which appears to be hit and miss. And then atheists are there who say it is totally unjust. There are certain people who have committed so much crime and God is just partial to them. So then they lose faith in God. So all these things are the dangers of following the concept of sin. Whereas if you use klesha or obstacle, it is your own obstacle which you can observe yourself, you can experience yourself. All the misconceptions go away. Whether God is just, God is unjust, how God acts, is he kind to some, is he merciful to some, does he punish some? So it clears any possible confusion of some kind of spiritual retribution or punishment, and either by nature or by man. If you don't believe in a God, they'll say nature takes its own revenge. Prakriti takes your own revenge. So these things, they have nothing to do. We have to understand one thing. According to Patanjali, it has nothing to do with the spiritual consequences of sin. Whatever you do, even if you believe, if the law of karma is believed, which most of the people in the world believe, in some form or the other, whether it is divine justice or law of karma, it is the same. But the spiritual consequence or the spiritual approach is that it is invariable and unescapable. You can't escape the consequences of what you do. So you have to be careful what you do, and that will inspire us the knowledge that if we go on doing positive things, ultimately we'll nullify all our negative baggage, and the punishment which ought to come, punishment or maybe the retribution is a better word. So some kind of revenge which nature, because we inflicted something on somebody, it has to come back to us. The consequences of that can be lessened if we get rid of the ignorance. As Thakur used to say, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, no matter how dark a room is, the moment you bring in light, the whole room is bright. It doesn't brighten up slowly because it was dark for thousands of years. Nobody had lit a light inside. But the moment you bring it, whether it was dark for 1 year or 100 years or 1,000 years, the darkness goes in a flash. So that is what gives us hope, that if the grace of God is there, and how to get that grace of God or the grace of Atman or the grace is just a word. It is what we really deserve, we get. So even grace we have to deserve in a certain sense. It is true that even to deserve grace, we have to work hard. So we can deal with these kleshas. Why I have under this long discussion I wanted, because this word obstacle has to be understood properly. They say when we were learning this Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, these kleshas were given a lot of importance. We thought, oh, let us discuss the higher aspects. Let us go to the other chapters which are more interesting. Samadhi and all. Very nice to hear. And the wonderful experiences in the third and fourth chapter. People want to skip this because this is the hardest part. So this is the hardest part, dealing with the kleshas. But without dealing with this, without these obstacles, we can't expect to march forward. So in essence, if we see, to sum up, I'll finish this sutra today. No doubt I have to go back a little bit just to discuss this particular concept, because Patanjali very, very clearly teaches us and says that all our mistakes, all our sins are nothing but obstacles, and they have to be regarded with a scientific approach, a little kind of detachment. This gives us a very solid reason for Vairagya. So just as the Gita says, the essence of Gita according to Thakur is Tyagi. So you have to detach. There is no other way. Otherwise you have to suffer the consequences. There are only two ways left. So detachment, any kind of detachment, it avoids the two extremes of lazy tolerance, tolerate everything, and a futile disgust. So some kind of disgust comes, oh, I can't, I am helpless, this is going to happen, it is my fate. That those things can be avoided if we follow Patanjali's method of dealing with these obstacles like kleshas. What is klesha and how to deal with it? It is like a surgeon who doesn't say, let us tolerate cancer. He just cuts it out and throws it. One has to be merciless. But he does not, that surgeon does not shrink from it in horror. He studies it. He tries to understand how it has grown, that cancer, and how the new growth of new cancer can be prevented. So no doubt we have these kleshas, but for that reason we should not be disheartened or just cry or just go on praying endlessly. No doubt if you pray in a positive way, even those things can be removed, but there should be a positivity. So if we understand how it is grown, and if we apply the right solution, we can get rid of that klesha. That is a beautiful lesson which is given here. So all our sins, all our mistakes have a meaning and purpose. As Swamiji says, I learned more from pain than from pleasure. So we have to remember that and take everything in our stride in a positive way. All our mistakes have a place in life. You don't have to be disheartened because you committed a few mistakes. You just stop repeating it and then go ahead. In fact, the symptoms of the pain of alienation from the Atman, our uh, real nature or the real Purusha, that leads to mistakes because we are, because of ignorance or because of avidya, we are not in touch with our ground reality, which is full of joy, Sat, Chit and Ananda, that Purusha or that Atman or that Brahman. We are not in touch. So that's why this alienation, the further you go away into the gross world, the more alienation you feel and the more disgusted you find. And the nature appears to be very harsh. But that same nature, if you go in your inward journey, we take wherever we are as the starting point, however gross we may be, however sinful the world may consider us to be. So the Gita gives us the assurance, even if a sinful man decides to follow me or meditate on me, he has taken the right decision because he is going towards the Atman. So that is the idea. So we are all looking for peace, freedom and security of some kind. But we may be dimly aware of what our Atman is. If we were clear, if everything was clear, then we would not have these kleshas. We all desperately want to be happy. Ananda we want. We don't want this small happiness. But our ignorance misdirects us. That happiness is clouded by the dust, as Patanjali says. It assures that ego says the Atman cannot really be within us. If it was within us, then things would have been very clear, but we can't see that. So we just ignore that and carry on with our egos, individual separate egos, quarrel with each other. And that dim happiness, that eternal happiness, a dim glimpse we may have now and then when we meditate deeply, that we forget and run after this imaginary happiness, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, and try to find the eternal happiness amidst the finite and transient phenomena of the external world. That is Maya, that is Prakriti. Like Thakur used to give an example. There is the musk deer. Of course, Vedanta also gives this example. The musk deer has the source of musk in its own fragrance. It exudes from his belly button. The deer, there is a musk deer, and it doesn't know that the wonderful smell that it is smelling is inside of itself. It's coming from inside, but it tries to search. The nose smells it and then it thinks it is outside and goes on in a mad chase to find that joy outside. So that's why we say that this divinity, this happiness, this glory, peace, stability, the firm ground is within. But unfortunately, we have resorted to avidya, then it has given rise to asmita, ego. Ego has given rise to raga, dvesha, and abhinivesh. So you have to break that chain, reverse it, and go back. So a tyrant, even a wicked person, Swamiji says, you go down as much as you can, but there will be a time when you will take the upward turn. A tyrant or a murderer or even a criminal who enslaves millions of people, a wicked person, a miser, for example, who hoards millions and millions of pounds. Then there are some traitors who sells or who betrays his nearest and dearest. And then there are murderers, addicts. They all are searching for some kind of peace and happiness. And they think it is all outside. It is in money, it is in, just like the musk deer. They think happiness, what they are seeking, the peace and the steadiness, the security they get by being one with the Atman, they want to find it in money, in other things. And then they accumulate it through every kind of vanity, ego or self-delusion. And then we seek peace through various material means. And for that we are prepared to struggle, but we are not prepared to struggle with less effort. We might easily have realized the Atman had we not been misled by our avidya. So that's why Patanjali says ignorance is the fundamental klesha. That ignorance, as Swami Premanandji once said, that we were so terrified of our examinations. In those days, to give examinations for a student is a horrible thing. So he said, we thought by coming to Thakur, we can escape the examinations. But he said, to our surprise or to our dismay, we found that Thakur is taking much more sterner examinations. We have to give more examinations. Every minute we are being tested or examined. So it may not be easy. These obstacles may not be very difficult to surmount. But Gita says that if we slowly, or Patanjali says, that all these obstacles to enlightenment can be dealt with if we first understand it. What is avidya? What is asmita? What is raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha? So these lessons of experience are very valuable. If raga were not there, then we would not have understood or attempted how to deal with it. Because we have raga, we deal with it. Because we have dvesha towards certain things, we understand it and we can deal with it. We know where the problem is. So also avidya, asmita, our ego, we know how much we have suffered because of our egos. And finally, abhinivesha. Every minute we are fearful of losing this or losing that. And finally, the greatest fear is we are afraid of losing our bodies. We are afraid to face death. So that is the greatest fear, abhinivesha. So in the next class, we'll start. I just wanted to discuss about these kleshas in this class so that we get a pretty good idea what it is all about. So now let me see if there are a few questions. One is one question. There's only one question. Passive is no good to purify the mind. Active is necessary to overcome obstacles, whatever ways one chooses. Is that so? Yes, yes. For everything, positivity is the only way. Swami Vivekananda, that's why Tagore said once, in Vivekananda, you will find everything positive. There is no negative. So he could declare in the parliament, and he could, in front of so many theologians and so many people, he could declare that it is a sin to call a man a sinner. So that is a positive approach. But it doesn't end with that. Just saying that there is no sin is not the solution. We have to deal with it. But what Swamiji meant was, harping on sin and with a certain amount of passivity. If you are very passive, then we'll take sin for granted. The whole world is committing, the whole world is doing it. What is wrong if I do it? That is what is known as passivity. So a passive person always accepts things as they are. Of course, not in a positive sense. That is taking raga and dvesha and trying to balance it. That is a positive way. But what I mean to say is that our weaknesses, our sinful tendencies, we take it for granted and then don't make an effort to surmount those obstacles. That is exactly what Patanjali is saying, trying to be positive. Now there's one more question, the last one. How to reconcile being discerning and selective with having strong likes and dislikes? So what is laissez-faire? I don't know. It's I think it is a French word, which is a easygoing attitude. Maybe it means that. It may be harmful. Yes, a easygoing attitude is always harmful. But that doesn't mean we should not be sthita pragna. Strong likes and one has to reconcile. Definitely one has to reconcile. So strong likes and dislikes, to balance it, we have to become, it's not easygoing attitude. It's not that we go easy. We accept that there are strong likes and we face it by saying that, no, I'm not succumb to my likes. I will take whatever is, whatever I can get, even if I don't like it. Then the second thing is, I don't like these things, but I will endure it. So that requires more strength. It is not an easygoing attitude. A easygoing attitude will definitely encourage a person to go towards the like. He will avoid the dislikes, the things that he dislikes. So there's no reconciliation involved here, because selection means that you select the easy approach, the path of least resistance. That, oh, I like these things, so I'll just surround myself with these things and I will avoid those things which I dislike. That is not positivity. The positive, there's no question of reconciling here. We have to accept everything with a firm willpower, saying that I don't like it and I don't have raga for it, but still I will do it. And then I hate it, but still I will accept it because it has come unasked, or maybe it is because of my karma. So it is actually a positive attitude. It's not a negative attitude, or it may not be harmful. It is not an easygoing attitude. People who are easygoing, they will never have this kind of firmness to deal with likes and dislikes with equal strength and equal willpower. Okay. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Oh, the question has been just clarified. I mean, if even though making choices conducive to sadhana at times, kleshas prevent. Of course, that happens. That definitely happens. That we make certain choices, and to sadhana at times, our kleshas prevent from following that sadhana. That is a conflict which one has to deal with, and their willpower comes in, because the kleshas will uh, prevent us from making choices which are good for us. Shreya is always better than Preya, but it is difficult to follow Shreya because our kleshas are preventing it. You are right. That is the big challenge. To understand these kleshas, one has to deal, but before we deal with these kleshas, we have to understand it. Once you understand it, half the job is done and we can do it. So there are certain things which are, if we know from our experience or from the Shastras that it is conducive to sadhana and kleshas may prevent it, then we have to overcome that kleshas. We have to do tanukarana, or attenuate them, or at least suppress them. Not repress them, suppress them consciously so that they don't disturb our sadhana. Sri Ramakrishna gave wonderful examples. If you see the gospel, he found so many ways and means to deal with these kleshas in different ways. So that is what is meant by not giving, not relaxing. One has to be up and doing. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.